Hi there, I'm Fox 13 meteorologist Nash Rhodes with myfoxhurricane.com, and I've got an update on what's happening in the tropics right now, where Rafael has really been the center of discussion over the past several days. At the moment, it is still a powerful Category 2 hurricane on the cusp of becoming a major hurricane, fixing to make landfall in Cuba here shortly at some point this afternoon. It has a very defined center of circulation and now eye, as we are looking at satellite imagery, at something that wasn't there late last night. As it's intensified pulling to the north, it's developed that eye and even gotten a little bit more symmetrical, all indicators that this is a strengthening system, as it's expected to bring damaging winds and the potential for life-threatening storm surge to Cuba as it makes landfall again later today before pushing off of Cuba heading into tonight. Now, Rafael's not going to be a problem for us in Florida, apart from the Florida Keys, where tropical storm warnings have been issued. Initially, it's going to make for some choppy conditions on the waters. But as we look at the latest on Rafael, you see hurricane warnings in effect for sections of Cuba, as this is expected to pull to the north and then take a sharp jog to the west. That has everything to do with a large area of high pressure that's currently over Florida and sections of the southeast United States. That's going to push this and nudge it away from us. And you can see that weakening trend as well with the latest forecast cone from the Hurricane Center. Those wind speeds dropped from about 115 miles per hour as it's out toward Cuba down to just 80, then 60, then 40 mile per hour sustained winds heading into the beginning of the upcoming work week. Now, yesterday when we were discussing the potential track or path that this would take, there was a lot of inconsistency down the pipeline with whether or not this would take a bit more of a turn to the north or whether this would dive south into the southern sections of the Gulf of Mexico. You can see here with the latest forecast, high confidence in this turn to the west. But then as we play this out through the weekend and into the start of next week, they are all over the place with more of these forecast models starting to favor a southward solution that would still give this the potential to be a tropical storm approaching Mexico at some point next week. Either way, if this pulls to the north, it's still going to be in a hostile environment, which would lead to the weakening of this system. And that's just the trend that we're continuing to watch. Here's the latest from our forecast models. The latest futurecast showing that as we head into tonight, right around 10 p.m., this is getting a little bit closer to Florida, but it's going to be as close as it's going to get heading into Thursday morning, which is about 100 to 200 miles to our south and west, bringing the potential for tropical storm force winds to the Florida Keys and maybe some tropical storm force gusts along the coastline of southwest Florida as this pushes by. Latest forecast track still taking this a little bit farther to the west than what we were looking at just yesterday. And I want you to take a mental snapshot of how this storm is looking right now here at 10 a.m. This is expected to weaken quite a bit heading into Thursday, Friday, and then ultimately into Saturday. Not really an impressive storm in terms of its size and its strength as it gets into the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, where it will be met with cooler sea surface temperatures and additionally some very strong upper level winds, which would try and kind of tear this system apart and make it very unstable with the direction that it would potentially take. We're already seeing increased moisture here across the west coast of Florida, with deep tropical moisture being funneled in here on the right side of this system. But as this pushes off to the west heading into Friday, you can see a lower humidity, at least just a tiny bit lower down at the surface, and not as much deep tropical moisture in the upper levels of our atmosphere. So that's going to lower our rain chances just a tiny bit heading into this weekend, with the next 3 days of rainfall not looking as impressive as what we were tracking just a couple of days ago. A lot of that heavy rain being closer to the core of this storm as it takes that turn, and closer to home, we're going to be seeing several spots with the potential for 1/4 of an inch to maybe 1/2 an inch of rainfall, and rainfall chances for the next 2 days or so at about 40 to 50%. We also talked about wind gusts. The strongest of those winds will be, again, closer to the center of this system, which will be nearer to the Florida Keys and southwest Florida than here in central Florida, as those tropical storm force and hurricane force wind gusts stay off our shoreline. And we're just going to be dealing with some very choppy waters off the west coast of Florida. But otherwise, tropical storm force winds will mainly be into southwest Florida and potentially down into the Florida Keys. Apart from this system, Rafael's not the only thing that we're watching in the Atlantic, but thankfully it's just one area of disturbed weather approaching areas just north of the Greater and Lesser Antilles. This only has a low 30% chance of formation over the next 7 days, and the environment that's going to be tracking into does not look as conducive as the environment in the Caribbean, where we just saw Rafael form. Still, if this gets a name, it would take the name Sarah. Tony and Valerie are the next two names up on the Atlantic storm naming list for this year. We'll continue to keep you up to speed here at myfoxhurricane.com as we get new developments on Rafael and any other tropical trouble that tries to develop as we close out this hurricane season at the end of this month.